Now it's my honor to introduce Chris Brown, who's a partner at Goodwin. Goodwin has been our presenting sponsor for the past few Women's Health Tech Challenges and a great friend to me and many of us here today. Chris and his team recently kicked off a practice specifically targeting this space. Chris is going to discuss the importance of a startup cap table, something that should matter to all founders, investors, and partners. And I see a lot of you are here today, so thank you so much. Chris, welcome to the stage, and thank you for all you do to support women-led companies.
My pleasure to be here, Susan, and nice to see you and Nina and the others. Really so excited to be a part of today's event. Let's see, let me start off with just highlighting how important we think Hitlab and the work it does is for really women and men, especially in this area where the chief innovation officers for most homes are the women who are spending most of the money on healthcare and wellness and other products for their families. And so it's a huge market that we take very seriously at Goodwin. We're proud to have recently, and maybe you can turn to the next slide if you don't mind, started an initiative which really is just formalizing what we've been doing for many years, which is to focus on the women's health and wellness sector. We're proud to be the first AmLaw 100 law firm that actually had a woman as our managing partner. She devised the strategy for our firm, which is very unique, which is to focus on sectors and not on stages of transactions. So we do everything from forming companies all the way to taking them public, the entire life cycle of healthcare and life sciences companies. And we found that this sector has quite a few women leading the way, but didn't have really a focus in terms of setting up networking and other events like this one. And so we thought as a law firm that we should try to gather together all of these resources again, which we've had for years in this form so that they can be easily accessed by our clients, not just so that we could provide legal services, but so that we can help women entrepreneurs, women investors, and others network and do what is needed to grow this exciting area. So this slide just goes over some of the focus areas and mentions a few of our clients, but the list is much larger than this. If you don't mind going to the next slide, I could dig into the topic at hand here, which is something I think is super important for any early stage company, any startup to be thinking about. It seems obvious maybe to all of you and not that complex, but trust me, a lot of mistakes get made at this very early stage of putting together the ownership of your startup. A quick story. My brother, and you know, I've been a lawyer for almost 30 years here, and my brother about 10 years ago didn't consult me and messed this up. And I'm going to tell you a quick story on what he did, so that's a lesson to all of you. He and 3 friends had an idea for a technology. It was not in the healthcare space, in the more general tech space, and they came up with an idea and patented it. Sent it into the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. It sat there for a couple of years, and actually the patent got issued. It was a very seminal patent. It had to do with location-based advertising, sort of when you're walking by a Starbucks, right? And it sends you a little coupon to come in and buy a cup of coffee. That actually was an idea my brother and his 2 friends had 10 plus years ago. It seems ubiquitous now, but it was new back then. When that patent got issued, they were inundated with offers to buy their company. And ultimately, and it was everyone, it was Facebook and Apple and Google, you name it, it was all of them. And in the end, they actually sold it to Facebook, but they had never thought about a cap table or ownership or who owned what. They'd never even formed a company. And so they actually received quite a lot of money, and I don't cry over this too much, but they wound up paying ordinary income instead of capital gains taxes because they never divided up the pie, set up a company, had a cap table, and put the assets into it. So amazing story of stupidity in terms of many millions of dollars that were left on the table by them. So anyway, you've got to set up the company with and put equity in, and you need to actually do it early on at a stage when the company is just your idea, because to the extent you bring in assets that have value later on, you're actually creating trouble for yourself, because no one wants to pay too much money for their initial stock. In fact, most people think the stock just gets issued to them. They maybe pay nothing or they pay pennies for it. But to the extent you might be bringing in an actual asset of some type, maybe one of your co-founders has invented something and is licensing it in, that has value. And so just like if you're on a game show and you were thrilled to win a new car, you'd be surprised a week later or so when you received a tax bill because that car was worth, $30,000, and they've deemed that as income to you and they want 30% of it. Well, the same is true of stock you may get in a company. And if you're coming in at a time when it has value, that stock, which is a liquid, of course, and no means of actually doing anything with it early on, has value, and you will get charged by the IRS for taxes associated with it. So get in early, pay a little bit of money, and then bring the assets into the company. This is critical. This little example here I thought was just useful, just so people can understand what pre-money valuation, post-money valuation is. You hear these terms thrown about, you may not understand it. Real simple example: if you're valuing the company with pre-money valuation of, say, simply $1 million, then you will own initially 100% of that company. But if an investor puts in, say in my example, 250,000, the total is 1.25 million. So they own 250 divided by 1.25 million. That's 20% of the company. But if someone says they're coming in with a post-money valuation of $1 million, you actually get, the entrepreneur only is getting 750,000 of value. They're owning 75% of the company, and the investor's getting 25%. So those two terms mean something quite different. And that kind of is a segue into something quickly I want to tell people to be very careful about. When you're making promises of equity, you need to be not necessarily talking in percentages in writing, at least. You do not want to make a commitment to anyone that you're going to give them, say, 5% of your company with no reference to the timing. If you say you get 5% as of the date hereof or when we actually form, that's one thing. But if you have a piece of paper to someone says you get 5% of the company, well, you may grow that company, it goes public, it's 5 years from now, and someone comes along with that piece of paper and says, where's my 5%? In other words, that hasn't contemplated dilution, which will naturally occur as other investors come in. And there's a very famous case involving Facebook where one of the founders had that type of piece of paper and it went into litigation. So I want you to think about that as you're contemplating your startup as well. Finally, I want to say that the sort of percentage ownership concept of a company is something that a lot of people get very fixated over. In other words, they want to own a certain percent of the company. They want to own over 50%. They think that control is guided by that. But the truth is that I always tell people best to take in the money if it's good money from investors, have them own whatever percentage they may require, again, within a range of reason, because you ultimately can maintain control over your company, even with as little as 5% of the company through a contractual means, through a stockholder agreement. So don't get fixated on percentage ownership. Stay fixated on how you control and run the company. It is my maxim, which I've said for years, is it's better to own 1% of $1 billion company than 100% of a $100 company. So I'm going to leave you all with that because our time is limited. I probably overstepped my timing already, but I want to say, and I put into the link that I put together a term sheet cheat sheet that I want anyone who is interested in the session to have. I'm not sure if I should have, Susan, but I gave out your email. I gave out my email, and please email either one of us, and we'd be happy to share that with you and also answer any more detailed questions anytime. It's our pleasure. My firm's pleasure, Goodwin's pleasure to be a part of this event. And thank you, Susan and Nina, for the opportunity. And also I see Justin there. Thank you, Justin.
Hey, Chris, just one quick question. We have a question from the audience and you have a little bit of time, so it's worth asking. Someone asked, how does money get into a company when a stock owner sells its own stock and gets out? So would you mind just answering that live for us?
Well, it doesn't go to the company if a stockholder sells their stock. That's a good question. Many times, in fact, even public companies, they go public, they sometimes raise money for themselves, and they sometimes essentially raise money for their stockholders. So if you own stock in a company, in my example on this page, you're the investor and you own 250,000 on the left of stock, 20% of the company, you can sell that, your stake, to someone else if you want to do so. If the company, and that's a transaction between you and a third party. If the third party doesn't necessarily want you to be bought out because you're key to the company and they want you to be connected to the company to help enhance its value long term, instead they may prefer to buy company stock directly from the company, in which case your 20% in that example might be diluted down to 15% because the company has issued new stock to a new person. Does that answer that question sufficiently?
That's great. And thank you so much. We have a lot of angel investors and folks that are interested in angel investing, so that's hugely helpful. So thank
Well,
you, Chris.
I'm going to skip my next two slides, which are pure marketing on Goodwin, but you can share them with anyone who's interested. We, of course, as lawyers, love to market our firm. We're all over the world. We're all over women's issues. And thank you so much again.
Great. Thank you, Chris, again. And thank you again for Goodwin for being our sponsor. We really appreciate it.